Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
We begin with politics. Primary elections were held last night in Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Kansas, and Ohio. And former President Donald Trump won all 5 Republican primaries with 75 to 81% support. President Biden did the same on the Democratic side, except in Florida, which canceled its primary. He won with 83 to 91% of the vote. Kansas was the only state with a none of the above option on the Democratic ballot. That took 10%.
Well, as for the down-ballot races, Nathan, it was a good night for Trump-backed candidates. In Ohio, businessman Bernie Moreno defeated 2 other Republicans with 50% of the vote to take on Democratic incumbent Sherrod Brown for U.S. Senate.
And I want to thank President Trump for all he did for me, for this campaign, for his unwavering support, for his love of this country.
Several other Republicans advanced with the former president's support. Derek Merrin will take on Democratic Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur in Ohio this November. He won the GOP primary with 52% of the vote. In Illinois, Mike Bost is leading Darren Bailey 52% to 48%. The Associated Press has not called the race, but Bailey has conceded. And in California, Trump-backed Republican Vince Fong advanced to a runoff with 42% of the vote to fill the seat left open by former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He'll face fellow Republican Mike Boudreau, who won 24% in the May 21st special election.
Hey, Karen, there are new developments this morning regarding that migrant arrest law in Texas. It is back on hold just hours after the law briefly took effect. A federal appeals court prevented Texas from arresting and deporting migrants who are accused of entering the U.S. illegally. The 3-judge panel acted after the Supreme Court returned the matter to the New Orleans-based 5th U.S. Circuit with instructions to quickly resolve open questions in the case.
Now, Nathan, to the latest on the war in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will speak with Senate Republicans later today. And we get this story from Bloomberg's Steve Potusk in Washington.
The call will be via video and comes a week after the chamber's top Democrat Chuck Schumer called for elections to replace him. Schumer, an ally of Israel in Congress for decades, had urged Netanyahu's government to do more to avoid civilian casualties and allow aid to flow more freely to Gaza residents. Senate Republican Conference Chairman John Barrasso invited Netanyahu to speak today. Barrasso, along with other Republicans, have condemned Schumer's remarks. In Washington, Steve Potusk, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Steve, thank you. In other geopolitical news, the Biden administration is said to be considering sanctions for Huawei's secretive chip network. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
Sources say the U.S. could blacklist Chinese semiconductor firms. This comes after Huawei notched a significant technological breakthrough last year. Now, such a move would mark another escalation in a U.S. campaign to ring-fence China's AI and semiconductor ambitions. Sources say most of the Chinese entities affected were previously identified as chip-making facilities. These are facilities built by Huawei. No final decisions have yet been made. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Brian, thanks. Well, futures are mostly lower this morning, a day after the S&P 500 closed at an all-time high. Today's attention turns to the Fed. Well, there might not be much anticipation on the decision, no rate cut expected. There is a lot of interest in what Jay Powell and company say about the future of monetary policy. And we get a preview from Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
It's not about rates this time. The first thing investors will look at is the dot plot. Sticky inflation readings the past 2 months have spawned predictions the median dot will indicate fewer rate cuts this year to just 2 from 3 forecasts last December. Second on the watch list, the summary of economic projections, the economic forecasts of the 19 members of the Fed's rate-setting committee. Those inflation readings have analysts anticipating Fed officials will revise their 2024 rate projections higher. There are also questions about whether the year-end forecast unemployment rate will move higher as well. And finally, bond investors in particular will want to know what officials discussed about future plans for running down the Fed's balance sheet. Was a decision made to taper the runoff? Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Mike, thanks. The economy is also in focus in Europe. UK inflation fell more sharply than expected. In fact, it cooled to the lowest level in 2.5 years. The Consumer Price Index rose 3.4% in February from a year earlier. That's slower than the 4% pace the month before. Economists say the data keep the Bank of England on track to reduce interest rates later this year.
In company news this morning, Nathan, shares of J.P. Morgan Chase are little changed in early trading. It is boosting its dividend by 9.5%. We get the story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The New York-based bank lifted its dividend to $1.15 a share after reporting a record profit last year. The unexpected increase marks the second time in the past 12 months that J.P. Morgan Chase has boosted its quarterly payout. J.P. Morgan Chase generated about $50 billion of net income in 2023 and had raised the payout by 5% to $1.05 a share for the third quarter. So far this year, J.P. Morgan Chase shares are up 13.9%. It next reports earnings April 12th in New York. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Charlie, thank you. It's a very big day on the IPO market. Bloomberg News has learned Astera Labs is set to raise about $713 million, tapping demand for investors related to artificial intelligence. Sources say Astera and the current stockholders are selling almost 20 million shares for $36 each. Jay Woods is chief global strategist at Freedom Capital Markets.
Astera is an AI play, and what's hotter than AI right now? That, to me, you could see a little euphoria, and you could see that 30% pop. It's not where it opens, it's how it trades after the opening and then the subsequent few days. Let's see how they do a week, 2 weeks later.
Jay Woods of Freedom Capital says Astera backers include Intel along with Sutter Hill Ventures.
And Nathan, another highly anticipated IPO prices tonight. We're talking about Reddit, and we get more from Bloomberg's Bailey Lipschultz.
Social media platform's first-time share sale will price later this evening before debuting on Thursday. Expectations are for it to be valued around $6 billion. That's a sharp drop-off from the $10 billion where it was valued in a private round back in 2021. Analysts and investors are keen to see how it does after selling shares to loyal users, which could draw some flack. Those moderators and people with so-called high karma scores are able to buy into the IPO. So it'll be interesting to see how Reddit performs and trades in the wake of a dearth of technology IPOs after ARM back at the end of last year.
And that's Bloomberg's Bailey Lipschultz, who says Reddit will trade under the ticker RDDT. And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories that are making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. New York Mayor Eric Adams again denied allegations in a lawsuit accusing him of sexually assaulting a former colleague in 1993. Adams says it did not happen. The woman first filed a notice of claim in November under the Adult Survivors Act. It is a state law that suspends for a year the usual time limit to sue over an alleged sexual assault. Adams once again denied the allegations yesterday during a news conference.
I don't recall meeting the person, and that is not who I am as a person.
In the lawsuit, the accuser says she was seeking a promotion in the New York Transit Police Department and asked Adams for help. Adams, then a police officer and member of the Guardians Association, is alleged in the lawsuit to have driven the woman to a vacant lot and demanded sexual acts. A U.S. district judge sentenced 2 of 6 Mississippi law enforcement officials for the racist torture of 2 black men. Former Deputy Hunter Elward received more than 17 years, and Lieutenant Jeffrey Middleton got 20 years. They were among the 6 who gave themselves the name the Goon Squad because they did not follow the rules and often subjected the people they deemed suspects to humiliating torture. Last year, the Goon Squad burst into the home of a white woman without a warrant after a white neighbor reported several black males were staying in the home. Victims Michael Jenkins, who was shot in the mouth, and Eddie Parker brought a lawsuit, which led to an investigation that put a stop to the violence. Parker spoke after the sentencing.
What is given and what is done, I forgive that part. But other than that, he still did, what he did, and he has to be punished for that.
4 more deputies will be sentenced today and tomorrow. Donald Trump is suggesting that he'd support a national ban on abortions around 15 weeks of pregnancy, voicing for the first time support for a specific limit on the procedure. The former president, in a radio interview yesterday, says people are agreeing on 15, and I'm thinking in terms of that. Hormonal contraceptives can now be dispensed by New York pharmacists without a prescription. Those participating pharmacies can provide up to a 12-month supply of the medication. Meanwhile, it's said that the governor is trying to make it a way for New York and healthcare sanctuaries for women.
As long as I'm governor, their rights are protected, that this is deeply personal to me as a mother and a woman in this state.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. It is time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi, and we bring in John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The Jets started slowly in free agency, but after recently adding veteran tackle Tyron Smith from Dallas, they signed longtime L.A. Charger wideout Mike Williams. 7th pick of the 2017 draft. He's had injuries, including the torn ACL this past season, but when healthy, Williams has had a couple of recent 1,000-yard seasons. Tackle Trent Brown signed with Cincinnati. He'd been with New England. 67 NCAA tournament games. The first team to advance, Little Wagner College out of Staten Island. It's the first NCAA win in school history. Only the second game the Seahawks have played. At the first 4 in Dayton, a 71-68 win over Howard. Wagner only has 7 scholarship players. The coach is Donald Copeland.
Having 7 players, I would imagine some places they might just come in the gym and just say, hey, listen, we got 7. We just got to go through the motions. We never did that. We prepared the right way. We expected to win even when we did lose. And then now to fight in the NEC tournament the way we did, it speaks volume, I think, to the culture. I think it speaks to the kids I have.
It'll be a tad tougher for Wagner tomorrow in Charlotte against North Carolina, top seeds in the West. Also, Colorado State crushed Virginia 67-42. 2 more games in Dayton tonight, and the tourney begins in earnest. 16 games tomorrow. St. Peter's, who's a 15 seed, has a game late tomorrow against Tennessee. The NIT underway. BC won at Providence at the Garden. Rare loss for the Rangers, only their 9th all year at home. Winnipeg got a hat trick from Mark Scheifele, won 4-2. Rangers' 4th loss in their last 21 games. Play tomorrow in Boston. Bruins got a hat trick from David Pastrnak, beat Ottawa 6-2. Devils got a pair of goals from Timo Meier, down Pittsburgh 5-2. The Islanders lost to Carolina 4-1. At Barclays, Nets lost to the Pelicans 104-91. Nets' 4th straight loss since Christmas. Brooklyn is 11-28. Wizards lost by 25 to Houston. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports.
Let's get back to the latest primary results, what they say about the battle for control of Congress and the White House. We're joined now by Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. So, Bill, Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Kansas, and Ohio. No surprise, President Biden and former President Trump swept them all. So we look down ballot. What does the victory for Bernie Moreno in the Ohio Senate race say about Trump's hold on the GOP?
Yeah, you're right, Nathan. It's we're having to look elsewhere for clues about what might happen in November, how strong the support is for both of the candidates, President Biden and former President Trump. And certainly the Trump campaign is going to look very happily on this victory by former car dealer and cryptocurrency mogul Bernie Moreno. He has been closely aligned with President Trump. He's had President Trump himself attending rallies in support of him, and a lot of very pro-Trump friends and allies joining in that. So there's one sign there. It was also closely watched because people less associated with the Trump wing of the party, such as Governor Mike DeWine, were favoring other candidates in the race who lost. So, Ohio in the past has not been one of the more, like pro-Trump Republican states, but there will be a big question about whether his forces are able to defeat Sherrod Brown come November.
Now, that's going to be the big question, not just in that race, but in all the other races where Trump-backed candidates did well. Does the Trump wing of the GOP prevail in November, or is the establishment wing going to be shown to be right, that Trump support doesn't necessarily translate into results in a general election?
You're right. President Trump has a very mixed history when it comes to endorsing candidates, particularly at the Senate level. But I think one thing that people will take note of in these Ohio races, and Ohio, of course, in the middle of the country, not bordering Mexico, immigration was a key issue in this. You did hear a lot of talk about the need by Trump supporters to build a wall, enforce immigration law more strictly, come down harder on immigration. So if that's happening in Ohio, that's going to be something you have to wonder whether it reverberates more nationally in the former president's favor.
Well, it seems like immigration is going to reverberate nationally in the courts as well. What do you make of this back and forth over this Texas migrant deportation law that the Supreme Court allowed to go forward, and then just hours later, an appeals panel decided to block?
Yeah, it's a pretty remarkable back and forth there between the Supreme Court and the Texas courts. The Texas court has blocked that law. That law, if you remember, basically makes it a state crime to enter Texas illegally or to leave it illegally. So it was an attempt by Texas officials to take over immigration control at some level. It's still not clear how they were going to be enforcing that, what facilities they had, how were they going to make that determination. And it may again go back to the Supreme Court now that the lower court has ruled. But it has put officials actually on the border in a very strange position of trying to figure out at which point in time which laws they're supposed to be trying to carry out.
Only about 30 seconds left, Bill, but we're expecting a call today from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Republican senators just days after Democratic leader Chuck Schumer rebuked him on the Senate floor.
Right. Republicans are really trying to take advantage of this issue that has strongly divided the Democrats. Chuck Schumer basically said there should be maybe new elections in Israel. That's been heavily criticized by Republicans. Of course, you had former President Trump coming out just recently saying Jewish voters who support Democrats hate Israel and hate their religion. So really trying to inflame this issue. We'll see, whether this takes hold and whether this actually helps Netanyahu or Republicans going forward.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.